As talk of the next season is underway, and many of us are starved for hockey content, I decided to do pretty much what everyone's doing, and make some predictions for the 2021 NHL season. Keep in mind, much of this is subjective and purely my opinion, so don't hit up your bookie on my behalf. First, we'll start out in the East and work our way out west midway through. And with that, here are 6 bold 2021 season predictions from yours truly.
When he hoists the Stanley Cup, he really hoists the Stanley Cup. The highest ever.
As soon as the Bruins made their way off ice following defeat at the hands of the reigning champs in the Lightning, reporters couldn't wait to ask Bruins captain the ultimate question. Would he be returning to the team that he'd been representing for over a decade? And for many Boston fans, the thought of Chara absent from the lineup indefinitely might be cringeworthy to even fathom. But even though the current UFA was adamant on his intent to remain with the B, Chara's agent has said in multiple reports that the defenseman is awaiting the 2021 format before making a decision to return. Prior to entering the bubble, Chara was adamant about one thing, quote, "I think that right now, we all have to look after each other and after our families. I know it's kind of a cliche answer, but in these days, I think hockey is secondary," end quote. Therefore, if the 43-year-old family man is proposed another bubble concept for the upcoming season, which will probably happen, Chara will most definitely be taking a step back and possibly retiring as a future Hall of Famer.
Huge news in the hockey world. Taylor Hall, the newest Buffalo Sabre.
For many spectators and NHL fans alike, free agency was very goalie-oriented this time around. But it also offered us one nice surprise that no one saw coming, as Taylor Hall, who was projected to leave the desert, chose a team with much potential but a non-cup contender in the Buffalo Sabres. But for Jack Eichel, the team, and Sabres fans, it seemed that Christmas had come early, as they had finally acquired another star talent that they desperately needed to support the captain. As Jeff Skinner, who was once thought to be the answer on wing, hasn't quite panned out like the organization had expected. And really, Taylor Hall for Buffalo was just one of the many improvements that newly appointed GM Kevin Adams has put in place on the team, as other reinforcements, including previous 3-time 40-goal scorer Eric Stahl, and depth players like Cody Eakin and Curtis Lazar, have made Buffalo seem much more appealing on paper. Therefore, even though it's early, I see the Sabres finishing next season with a huge W that many loyal fans have been so eager to see, making the playoffs. And after nearly a decade without a postseason entry, in my opinion, it'd be a win all around the hockey world just to see the longest playoff drought finally come to an end. Speaking of the longest playoff drought, while the Sabres unfortunately bear that title, the Pittsburgh Penguins currently have the longest ongoing playoff streak by a long shot of 14 seasons, as the last time the Penguins failed to place was during Crosby's rookie campaign, which is, like Paul Bissonnette likes to say, absolutely banana lands. But as a Penguins fan, I'm definitely not here to gloat, but to be rather realistic. After barely scraping by while placing 3rd in the Metro Division the past 2 seasons and failing miserably after in the playoffs, I think it's pretty evident that the days of winning championships in the Steel City are a thing of the past, at least for now. Following a few questionable moves as of late, Jim Rutherford has essentially taken on another contract that, if not dealt shortly, will limit the amount of talent that can be acquired to aid the two-headed monster in Crosby and Malkin. To me, this will be a year of growth in the Burgh and acclamation, as many players such as Kasperi Kapanen and Mike Matheson have much to prove but do have potential. But with the Metro becoming increasingly competitive and with several teams improving substantially more around them, I don't see Pittsburgh scraping by, at least this time. If there were 3 teams in the league last season for me that relied most heavily overall on their starters, I'd have to go with the obvious first in Winnipeg, Toronto, and lastly Vancouver, as Jacob Markstrom for the past 3 seasons with the Nucks actually was shouldering a huge amount of workload in net. Both 2017-18 and 2018-19 had the netminders starting in 60 games, which isn't as common today throughout the league, as the frequent 1A, 1B scenario is much more prevalent. Therefore, without having the constant pressure pressure to outperform the other tendy that he had in Washington, with the number one spot clearly secured and tons of playing time on the horizon, I see Holtby having a bounce-back year in his debut season with Vancouver. He'll probably have more of a workload, but less pressure to perform, easier division, and probably more of an atmosphere that appeals to the goaltender personally, as we all know what his political beliefs are. With that being said, I really believe he's going to surprise a lot of viewers, and even go as far to say that he'll be nominated for the Vezina. Might not win it, but I think he'll be a contender in the running. While it was definitely strange seeing longtime Bruin Tory Krug putting on a Blues jersey earlier this offseason, the move out west was a long time coming. Following multiple 50-point seasons throughout his tenure with the B, it's pretty logical as to why Krug left after failing to secure a long-term deal while taking his talents elsewhere. And while many may agree with me that playing for the team that beat you in the Stanley Cup final might be a little awkward at first, in my opinion, it's also going to warrant a major adjustment period. For Krug, the majority of his tenure in Boston, he spent playing with what is now known as the perfection line, in Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, and David Pastrnak. Dynamic players that he'd had time to develop chemistry with, especially on the power play, before reaching that 50-point plateau. I don't think Krug will have the worst season of his career or anything. I just think he'll have a slower start statistically than projected, and won't outdo his predecessor next season in Alex Pietrangelo. With Vegas playing more of a free-flowing style and the Blues more structured overall, I think it'll enable Petro to not have as slow of a start with his next team as Krug does statistically. Last season was a rough one in the Music City, unless, well, you're Roman Josi, that is, as the Predators narrowly escaped Minnesota in points by finishing with one more last season. Followed by a very disappointing loss to Arizona in the bubble, the Predators, similarly to the Penguins, have regressed immensely since their days spent in the 2017 Stanley Cup Finals. Currently tied with Washington for the second longest playoff streak with 6 consecutive postseason entries, Nashville, even though they've tried to take steps in the right direction with bringing in Matt Duchene and more recently Luke Kunin, their constant struggles on special teams are, in my opinion, a sign of internal wear and tear. Despite this though, Predators fans have nothing to hang their heads about, as Nashville, along with Chicago last decade, was routinely one of the top teams to beat within the Central Division.